and welcome to the follow-up of our Christmas episode. If you are moving forward with divorce and you want to understand what the meetings with divorce professionals will look like so you can feel prepared, then this is the video for you. I'm Kerry Griffiths and I'm a financial planner who works exclusively with women divorcing wealthy and powerful men. I'm joined by a psychologist and a family lawyer, and I will let them introduce themselves. So firstly, over to you, Anne.
Hi, I'm Dr. Anne from My Freedom to Thrive, and I'm a psychologist with 30 years experience. I work predominantly with women who are in high conflict divorce. So that means they're exiting relationships that are characterized by coercion and control. And the aim is to help them get as calm as possible, as quickly as possible, so that they can go on to move on to a happy, healthy, independent life.
Thank you. And then Teena, over to you.
Hi, my name is Teena Dhanota-Jones. I'm a family matrimonial solicitor. I have over 20 years experience in the industry, and I deal with high conflict and amicable divorces, which include men and women.
Fabulous. Thank you both. So we've got some great experts on side. We're going to cover 4 questions, so the same format as last time. And the aim is to make you feel comfortable and confident with what meetings would look like with people from these different areas of the divorce profession. And we'll take it in turns, and you'll get a perspective from an emotional, a financial and a legal viewpoint on what to expect. So the first question we've got, I'm going to give to you, Dr. Anne, and I'd like to know, what would an initial meeting with a psychologist look like? What kind of questions might you ask, and just kind of give us a flavour of that?
Okay, so essentially when someone contacts me, the first thing I ask them really to do is to get in, have a look on my website, because what I want them to do is feel as comfortable as possible. It's really quite a scary thing to pick up the phone and speak to a therapist. And no matter how much I would attempt to make that easier for somebody, I really do recognize that it's quite a big emotional jump to pick up the phone to speak to a professional. So what happens in the first call, after they've had a look at the website and got a sense of maybe what I'm like, what they're likely to encounter when they speak to me, is a really quite low-key conversation to really find out what's going on with them in their divorce, maybe some background about the relationship and really what it is they're struggling with. So that first call is a 15-minute call, and it's free. So it's just an opportunity, firstly, for the client mainly to assess whether I'm the person for them, but also if I think that perhaps they would be better suited speaking to someone, for example, a divorce coach, that maybe that's, they're not the client for me because it's a difficult divorce, but it's not high conflict, then I'll send them to someone else. But it's really just a getting to know you call to begin with.
Makes perfect sense. I'll go next because I think mine is quite similar, and I perceive, but we'll find out from Teena, that hers will be a little bit different. So I'll go next, and I'll just tell you a little bit about if you were to meet with a financial planner just in general, so that you've got that perspective. What would happen is the initial meeting would be a chance to understand what it is you need to get out of your work with a financial planner. So they would talk about what problems you currently have, what obstacles you need to overcome, and what a good outcome would look like for you. So you can start to talk a little bit about anything that's making you feel apprehensive during the divorce, and talk about the things that you want to ensure happen for you. Same as with Dr. Anne, the meeting is a chance for both parties to decide if they are going to work together. So I would also ask you a lot of questions around the support that you need and how you might want that delivered. And I'd also be checking whether what I do is going to add the most value to you. And we would, in that meeting, decide if we're going to work together, essentially. And it's a chance for us both to explore that and to decide if we really enjoy the time we're spending together, because we will spend quite a bit of time together. So that's what an initial meeting with me would look like. What about with you, Teena, or with a family lawyer in general?
It's really similar to both of you. So
okay.
I always have a 10-minute initial conversation, which then will normally lead to an initial fixed fee meeting. Much like you, the 10 minutes is to evaluate the client's case, the aspects of their case, just to ensure that we're able to work together. So then I will progress to a first meeting, and the first meeting with me is probably very different to yourselves. Whilst we're in tune with the difficulties of the divorce, we still have to focus on the legalities, So I will then want to go through a full detailed chronology with the client, and that involves things like their date of birth, the date they got married, and any significant financial aspects of their case. I'd want a brief detail of their assets and liabilities, so I'd go through that. We would discuss funding options, because obviously that's a really, really important aspect of the case. And I also will discuss alternative dispute resolution to ensure that we follow the correct path for that client. So I provide in the first meeting a unique, tailored approach to their case.
That makes perfect sense to me, actually. Can we stay with you, Teena, and could you tell us a little bit about, therefore, how a client could best prepare for that meeting with you?
Absolutely. I find that if a client attends alone, they really find it hard to absorb any information that you give them. So if they're able to and willing, I would always say bring a friend or family member, and that person is there to just provide moral support and hopefully make notes for them, because many a time a client will walk away and they really literally haven't taken the information in. So I will say bring a friend. It's your meeting. Give me a list of your questions. Prepare a list of your questions, because when a client then walks away, they're going to go through their list and go tick, 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 tick. I had all this answered. It's not my meeting, it's your money. You can certainly direct the path it's going to take. After that, after your list of questions, I would take you through some pertinent dates and discuss your asset and liabilities schedule that you would have hopefully prepared in advance of your meeting.
Well, we had the typical dog in the background, so apologies there, guys. That's fabulous. I love the idea of somebody coming along with you. I think that can make all the difference. And I love that you're offering that. So the list of questions also sounds like a really good way to get prepared. What would it be like with you, Dr. Anne? What could people do to prepare for a meeting with you to get the most out of it?
Well, really, it's sort of the same but different. Often clients come to me and they don't really recognize the difficulties they've had in their relationship. So often what happens is I'm asking a set of questions and going through almost like a checklist to see what the quality of the relationship is. So what often happens in the first meeting is that those questions then start to, if you want, open the floodgates. So somebody who up to that point has probably been quite stoic in how they've been dealing with their divorce, often, very rationally and very emotionally held in. What often happens is once we start to unpick, the chronology, going through how everything happened, how the relationship started, how the divorce has gone on, what happened, pre and post, then it almost acts like a snowball effect, because it's kind of like the scab, the plaster's being ripped off. So it's not maybe as structured as Teena's can be, because there's a certain set of information that you need. Often it really depends on the information that the client's providing me. But often in that first session is the first time that the client actually realizes that what they're experiencing is actually not the same as would be in a normal divorce. So that itself can be quite a shock.
I bet it's a lot to come to terms with once you're also realizing that your relationship is ending, to then have that reality. It's huge, isn't it? Talking from a financial planning perspective, many of my clients have not been the financial manager within their relationship. So that means they've typically not really been involved in any financial planning meetings, or if they have, they've been in the background. So they can feel really nervous and apprehensive about a first meeting with a financial planner. And the one that I talked about, where we're talking through kind of their expectations of what they want, etc. There's nothing that needs to be done to prepare for that at all. I just want clients to turn up and to talk to me about what is on their mind, what their worries are, and then I will help them understand how what I do supports and moves those areas forward for them, and the solutions that we can produce. And then as we move forward, if we decide we're going to work together, the very next meeting we had, I also wouldn't expect them to prepare for. we have a really clear understanding that as the divorce evolves, the information that's going to be produced for the legal teams is going to support what we're doing financially anyway. So I'm not trying to duplicate work or create a system where they're having to prepare for the legal team and for me. So we'll find a middle ground so that we are preparing the information at the same time. Possibly we're preparing for the legal team, but we're not expecting them to go and do an awful lot to get ready for the meetings, and their hand will be held all the way through anything they need to find out. So the assumption is that they don't know, and that we will support them to find out what they need to know. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's some initial information or a lot of detail that my clients know, but the assumption is that there isn't, and we can support them to get that information. And the other point I just want to make on this is my clients often fear being judged because they worry that they dropped the ball, that they had previously or at some point felt in control of finances. Then they got married and life got busy, and he had a natural tendency to like looking after the money. And there can be a sense of shame and concern that they are not as up to speed as they feel that they should be. And I just want to reassure clients that's absolutely not the case. It's really normal. It's a really efficient way to run a marriage, for people to have different roles in it. And you can actually learn and pick up what you need to know about the finances really quickly as well. So we're going to change tack a little bit, because one thing that is happening really imminently that would be really useful to position here is that there's a change in divorce legislation coming in April. And so we're going to see the introduction of no-fault divorce. And Teena, I suppose you're the obvious person to come to first. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and give us your thoughts?
So I think it's off on the 6th of April. The introduction of no-fault divorce comes in, which means that you do not have to explain why your marriage has broken down irretrievably. Once upon a time, you'd have to blame the other party and use grounds for unreasonable behaviour and adultery, and or you would have to experience a delay, because then you need periods of separation, such as 2 years or 5 years. With the no-fault divorce, all you're showing is that there's been a breakdown. You can submit a joint application or individual applications, and the terminology is changing. The anticipated changes that we wanted as family lawyers were not fully implemented by the government, and we fear that there are further hurdles to cross as the procedure is implemented. So we'll see there will be some changes, and we're being taught in the next couple of weeks how to file the application and address the procedure that has been put in, but we're looking at duration of 26 weeks. So that's due to start. Some people have said to me, should we wait? Should we delay? I would say there's absolutely no reason to delay instructing or speaking to a solicitor. Early advice is really important. We can address funding options. We can discuss children arrangements. It's really important to address jurisdiction as well, because we may not want to delay. We may want to secure jurisdiction in England, albeit we have left the EU. It's still an important aspect of the case. Sometimes there's fear that assets have been hidden. We need to act quickly if there have been, and delaying until April to secure or preserve assets is not going to be in your best interest. So although we've got new legislation coming in April, our advice is do not delay initial advice, because you might find it may be detrimental to delay taking the advice. You may find that you can take the initial advice and issue in April in any event, but get to a stage where you're almost able to conclude by then. So there's huge benefit in seeking early advice.
Fabulous, thank you. That's really clear. One thing that I hadn't picked up on until you've just said, duration 26 weeks. Tell me a little bit more about that. What did you mean?
So from the date you file your petition, it's now called a divorce application, and then you get the decree nisi, the name's changed for that as well, to getting the final certificate, which is known as the decree absolute, and the name has changed there again. They're saying there's a period of 26 weeks. However, as you both probably know, we always delay the final certificate in any event. So the anticipation is, if you want to conclude the divorce procedure, not the financial settlement, it could be wrapped up in 26 weeks.
Okay, That makes sense to me now. Thank you.
Sorry.
That was really good explanation. Dr. Anne, what are your thoughts around this new legislation?
Okay, so in terms of the sorts of behaviours I would see in a difficult divorce, I'm not sure that that's really going to change. The major significant, because the ex-partners are still going to try and work around the rules as best they can. So as Teena says, hiding assets, those types of behaviours, I'm not sure that that no fault divorce is going to change that aspect of it. What it is going to impact on is the guilt associated for a lot of my clients. My clients come to me and they're incredibly guilty. They're filled with shame that they failed at their marriage. And the idea that then even to get out of the marriage, no matter how bad it is, that they're going to have to accuse their husband of something, that it ought to admit that it's got to such a state that it's irretrievable, it's broken down to such an extent. That's a massive hurdle for my clients, because at the back of their mind, they really have tried incredibly hard to make this marriage work, and sometimes in the face of extremely difficult behavior. So now that they can say, okay, I can file for divorce, but I'm not having to accuse anybody of anything, is a way that they can say, okay, we can just do this without that massive psychological hurdle of having to accuse something of wrongdoing. And often, even though in the face of extreme wrongdoing of their partners, they still don't want to make that jump. So that for me is a good move.
Yeah, I like that perspective too. I'm having a lot of clients ask me about this, and obviously I'm not legally trained, I'm not a lawyer, so I do direct them to their own legal teams or pass on legal team details, because I think it's really important that you do have these perspectives and you see the bigger picture when you're deciding whether or not to wait. From a financial planning perspective, how amicable things are can really have an impact. I work the same as Dr. Anne, where there's quite a lot of conflict within a divorce, and disclosure is one of the first things that happen during the divorce process. And the more disclosure we can get in the most amicable way, the better. So that has a positive impact, although I do agree with Dr. Anne, as things kind of progress, I do feel that it will make very little difference in how that divorce plays out in the long term. But I'm hopeful that the very beginning part, we might start to see a little bit more, excuse the dog, we might start to see a little bit more kind of agreement, a bit more detail shared while things are still amicable. So last question for us, what are the next steps after a meeting? So what would actually happen? How might that look? And can we come to you first, Dr. Anne?
Okay, so once someone's made contact and we've agreed to move forward, then what I do is I offer clients two sort of options. One option is just general therapeutic support, so we'll do general therapy. But if they're in high conflict, what I'd really prefer them to do is my FLY program, and that's specifically to do with high conflict education. So it's to get clients as quickly as possible calm and their emotions settle down, so that they basically can start to take part in the divorce process. Normally when I get them, they've been attempting to negotiate with their ex-partner for around 2 years, and they're often incredibly frightened, very tired, and very, very confused. Their anxiety is off the scale. So the first step is really to get them to calm down. And once that's happened, that means their frontal lobes have started to activate, and they can start to plan. And as Teena says, taking a friend to the meeting, because at that point they're so over aroused, it doesn't matter what people are telling them. They're in a fight, flight, freeze. They can't actually take in the information. So that's the first step. The second step is then educating them about the types of tactics and the behaviors that they're seeing in their ex-partner, and how to be able to detach themselves from that, so that once they understand that they can see it as a type of set of behaviors that are separate to them. And again, that's going to help them protect themselves emotionally and plan for the future. And that's really the third step, which is about, okay, how are we going to continue going forward throughout this process? Because those types of divorces I work with, because they're high conflict, they're also time wasteful. This, we're talking years here. This isn't, this isn't the 26 weeks that would be fantastic. We're talking between, I have one client who's 10 years been in and out, back and forward. So it's about learning how to still live, how to build your life, having new relationships, learn how to do all of those things, build up your independence, whilst this is kind of happening to the side and to the background. And part of that is the most important part, because once the women, and all of them are highly capable, once they've made that jump mentally, then their lives start to really blossom. And that's when they start to be able to go, okay, I've got this here, but I'm still going forward and having a happy, independent life.
That's a really useful way of thinking about what's going to happen. I think we sometimes forget that life goes on during divorce, and divorce can become all encompassing. It can become like your whole life. So I love that support and the ability to move clients to happier lifestyles while this is still going on alongside them.
It's one of the main issues with a lot of the divorce advice for people in high conflict is that they put all of their energy and focus on the divorce. And I would absolutely disagree. If you do that, you may potentially lose years of your life, because that's all you're doing. You will still be stuck in the same position, and ultimately you're still under the control and whim of your ex-partner. So it's very much the opposite. It's how do we manage it, but be separate from it. It's happening in parallel, it's there, but life still goes on, and in a good way.
I love that. That makes perfect sense to me. From a financial planning perspective, what would happen after my first meeting with a client? Should they decide that they want to move ahead, I would send them all the necessary onboarding paperwork so they can read the terms and conditions and feel really comfortable about our working relationship. And then the meetings that would follow would be planned, and we would work out a timetable of what we were going to do when. We would communicate with the legal teams so that they know that I'm on board, and that they know that there is that resource there for them should they need it as they're putting together their plans and working out their strategy as well, so that they know that they can call on me. And I work with my clients as well for years, during the divorce. That can take years, but I work with my clients for life afterwards. So we put together a plan that is very much featured around getting them through the divorce. And then after that is done, we put together a plan that's about their ongoing life and how we build the future that they had anticipated and that we had financially prepared for. What about you, Teena? What happens after a first meeting with you?
I just wanted to pick up on the point that you've both made, which is excellent, that you've got to recognise that your client's life is going on, and we're just involved in an aspect of their life, a huge aspect, and we have to recognise that and be aware of that. And we shouldn't place demands on our clients and expectations to respond when we expect them to. So taking that on board and those very good points, what I normally do after a meeting is, we, much like yourself, Kerry, we do the onboarding and compliance matters and detail our terms and conditions. And one huge and important step is we send a detailed advice letter, and that will put everything in perspective, and it's an aid memoir for the client. Yeah. We then invite them to let us know what pace they want to progress at. We never dictate the timetable, because unless we've had an emergency application, we don't need to tell our clients how swiftly to move the matter. It's in their, it's their choice as to what speed they want to take it. So they, after the first meeting and the advice letter, they're armed with all the correct information unique to their circumstances, and they can decide what to do. So assuming a client has a meeting, has the advice letter, and wants to progress, they'll be told in that letter their next steps, their proposed funding options. Then I would draft a divorce petition and or even advise them to do it themselves, because it's so straightforward. It's basic online application. And then we would consider what options were available for alternative dispute resolution, and then progress with the financial matters in a manner that's suitable to that case.
Makes perfect sense. I love that approach. I've not considered that there was the option for the client to have so much control over that pace. So thank you for sharing that, Teena. I hope this has been really useful for everybody watching today. I know that there has been a lot of apprehension from my clients when they are thinking about working with other professionals, and I hope this gives you a little taste of how approachable we all are, and how we have your best interests absolutely at heart. Thank you for watching. Many kind regards.